If you're watching this, you've probably felt it too. That moment when someone looks completely normal, same posture, same voice, same casual smile, but something underneath it doesn't line up. You can't explain it. You just know. And your brain tries to smooth it over, tries to tell you you're being paranoid, rude, irrational. Because what's the alternative? That they're not human. I used to think those stories were fake, internet noise, creepypasta, the kind of thing people write late at night to scare strangers who want to be scared. I read them like entertainment, same as you probably have. Stories about things wearing faces, mimicking voices, blending in just well enough to pass until they don't. I never thought those stories were warnings. But there's a pattern people don't talk about. Or maybe they do and we just don't listen. Missing persons in remote areas, hikers who vanish off marked trails, search parties that find nothing, no struggle, no remains, no explanation, just absence. Entire people erase like they stepped out of the world instead of deeper into it. And every once in a while, something gets found. Not the person who went missing, something else. Something that looks close enough to pass at a distance. Close enough that if you didn't stop, if you didn't really look, you just keep walking. Maybe even say hello, maybe even walk beside it for a while. That's the part that should scare you. Because whatever this is, it doesn't hunt the way animals do. It doesn't chase, it doesn't force. It learns, it watches, and then it tries. Tries to move like us, speak like us, stand like us, but it's not perfect, not at first. There are mistakes, small ones, the kind your brain wants to ignore because noticing them feels worse than denying them. I've seen those mistakes up close, more than once. And I'm telling you this now because people keep disappearing and nobody is connecting the right dots. Not officially, not out loud, but the pattern is there if you know where to look. If you've ever had that feeling, like someone wasn't quite right, don't ignore it. Because I didn't. And this started with a missing hiker. I'm a park ranger. Been one for almost 8 years now, all in the same district. Same trees, same trails, same quiet stretches of land that people think they understand just because they've walked through them once or twice. My dad had the job before me. 26 years in the same forest, same badge, same roots. People used to say he knew the land better than anyone alive, like the forest had somehow accepted him as part of itself. That's the version of the story I grew up with. What they don't tell you, what he didn't tell me, is that knowing a place doesn't mean it's safe. It just means you've learned how to ignore the parts that don't make sense. I got the job because of him. No mystery there. I was 23, stuck in a hardware store going nowhere when he called and told me there was an opening. Short application window. If you're gonna apply, he said, do it now. So I did. Not because I loved nature or had some calling, but because it felt like stepping into a life that was already built. And at first, it was exactly what I expected. Quiet mornings, trail maintenance, talking to hikers about weather conditions and reminding them to pack enough water, filing reports in the back of my truck with the door open, breathing in pine and dust, and feeling like I'd escaped something bigger and uglier out there in the world. It felt safe. That's the word people use when they don't know what they're looking at. Because the truth is, the job looks peaceful until you see what it hides. My dad never showed me the worst parts. When I was a kid, I'd ride along with him on easy days, restocking trail registers, eating sandwiches on the tailgate, watching him scribble notes while the forest just existed around us. Calm, predictable, harmless. He never took me on a search, never took me out when someone didn't come back. I didn't even know how common that was until I was already on payroll. People go missing out here more than you'd think. Most of the time, it's simple. They get lost, twist an ankle, misjudge the trail. You find them, they're embarrassed, maybe a little dehydrated, but alive. It becomes a story they tell later, something funny, something harmless. That's the version that makes it into conversation. The other version doesn't. I should probably tell you something else before I go any further. I'm not built like my dad was. He could spend days alone in the backcountry and come back looking like he'd just taken a vacation. Me. One night in a lookout tower and I'm checking the locks 3 times before I can even think about sleep. I've been on medication since I was 19. Anxiety. The kind that makes you double-check doors you already locked, replay conversations you've already had, and feel like something is wrong even when everything looks completely fine. Especially when everything looks completely fine. For a long time, I told myself that's all this was. Just my brain doing what it does, looking for problems where there aren't any. And for a while, that explanation held. It kept everything in a neat, manageable box. Until the day I found the first body. The first one happened in my second year, early September, right at the tail end of hiking season. Still warm during the day, but the light starts dying earlier, like the forest is already preparing to shut down for something you can't see yet. We got the call around 7 in the evening. A woman at the trailhead said her husband hadn't come back. He'd left that morning for a day hike on one of the eastern loops. 12 miles, moderate difficulty, nothing unusual. He'd done it before, told her he'd be back by 4. At 7, she called us. That kind of thing happens more than people think. 9 times out of 10, it's nothing. Someone loses track of time, sits down somewhere quiet, underestimates how fast the sun drops behind the trees. You find them halfway back to the trailhead with a flashlight in their hand and an apology already forming. So we didn't panic. We started the search at first light. 4 teams, 2 per group, fanning out along the loop and the surrounding areas. I was paired with a seasonal ranger named Colby. He talked too much, moved too fast, the kind of guy who filled silence because he didn't trust it. We were assigned the eastern side, where the trail runs close to a narrow gully that feeds into the creek system. It's dense out there. Thick undergrowth, old trees, fallen logs that crumble when you step on them. Not the kind of place someone wanders into on purpose, but lost people don't follow logic. Colby stayed closer to the trail. I pushed deeper. I found the body around 10 in the morning. It was down in the gully, maybe 50 yards off the trail, lying flat on its back like someone had taken the time to set it there. Arms at its sides, legs straight. No signs of struggle, no indication it had fallen or rolled or been dragged. Just placed. The first thing I noticed was the skin. Pale but not the way you expect. Not blotchy or discolored or uneven. It was smooth, uniform, like the color had been mixed somewhere else and applied afterward. No bruising, no variation, just this flat, artificial tone that didn't belong in the woods. Then I saw the face. The mouth was open. Not slightly, not slack like you'd expect from a body. It was stretched wide, too wide. Wider than the jaw should allow, but when I looked closer, nothing was broken. No dislocation, no tearing. The muscles just weren't doing their job anymore. Like they'd been switched off. The lips were pulled back, and that's when I saw the teeth. Or what was left of them. Most of them weren't in the mouth. They were scattered around the head, lying in the dirt and ferns like someone had dropped a handful of small white stones. Some still had roots attached, long, pale, intact. They hadn't been knocked out from the outside. They'd been pushed out. From the inside. I remember crouching there, trying to make sense of it, and realizing something else at the same time. There was no smell. That's the part that got to me first, before anything else had time to settle in. A body in the woods, even a fresh one, has a presence. You smell it before you see it. Something heavy in the air, something biological. I'd been close to bodies before. You don't forget that. This one had nothing. The air smelled like dirt, wet leaves, morning fog burning off under the trees. The body wasn't participating in the forest. And the forest wasn't reacting to it. No flies, no insects, Nothing crawling, nothing buzzing, nothing drawn to it at all. Meanwhile, mosquitoes were biting the back of my neck, whining in my ears, landing on my hands. But not on it. It didn't feel like a body. It felt like a prop, something placed there to look right from a distance. I called it in, marked the coordinates, and sat down on a log about 20 feet away to wait. Colby came crashing through the brush a few minutes later. I told him not to look. He looked anyway. Didn't say a word after that. We waited close to an hour for the recovery team, and the whole time I couldn't shake the same thought. The forest didn't recognize it. And if the forest didn't recognize it, then what was it? By the time they bagged it and carried it out, I had already started trying to convince myself there had to be an explanation. Something medical, something rare, something I just didn't understand yet. That explanation didn't last long, because later that day, we realized something worse. It wasn't the missing hiker. At first, we assumed it was just a mismatch, paperwork lag, miscommunication. That happens more than you'd think. You find a body and for a few hours, sometimes a day, you don't know who it belongs to. But this wasn't that. The missing hiker was 44, broad shoulders, gym build according to his wife. The body we pulled from the gully was smaller, narrow frame, younger, maybe mid to late 20s, different hair color, different everything. By the time the dental records came back, it was already obvious. No match. Not just to the missing hiker, to anyone. No records, no missing person report, no database hit. Fingerprints didn't go anywhere either. It was like the person we found had never existed in any official sense. No history, no identity, just a body in the woods that didn't belong to anyone. That should have been the part that stuck with me. It was the autopsy. I had to request the report. Technically, I didn't need to see it. Most rangers don't. You log the recovery, file your notes, and move on. But something about that body, it didn't sit right. I needed to know what they found when they opened it up. Or what they didn't find. The cause of death was listed as undetermined. No trauma, no signs of disease, no toxins in the system, no indication of exposure. Nothing you could point to and say, this is what killed them. They noted the jaw, the teeth, described it in careful clinical language, anomalous post-mortem presentation. A neat way of saying it didn't make sense. But the line that kept pulling my attention back was buried further down. Internal examination. Absence of expected organ weight. I read that sentence 3 times before it started to click. The thoracic and abdominal cavities were described as lacking significant visceral mass. No detailed explanation, just a note for further review. Further review that never happened. They didn't say it directly. They didn't have to. The body was mostly empty. Not completely. There were structures, tissue remnants enough to classify it as human, but the mass wasn't there. The weight wasn't there. The things that should have been inside weren't, or they were reduced to something that barely counted. Like whatever had been there before had been removed. Or used. I remember sitting in my truck after reading that report, the engine off, the forest quiet around me, trying to force it into something logical. Some rare condition, some extreme form of decomposition, something I just didn't understand. But even as I thought it, I knew I didn't believe it. Because decomposition leaves signs. Nature reacts. This hadn't. I brought it up once, quietly, framed it as a question, something hypothetical. My supervisor gave me a look that lasted just a little too long before she told me the same thing everyone says when they don't want to dig deeper. There's nothing to follow up on. And that was it. The case didn't close, it just stopped. No investigation, no escalation, no one pushing for answers. It got filed away into that category of things that don't fit, so they get ignored until they disappear. That's the part no one tells you about systems like this. They don't solve every mystery. Sometimes they just decide which ones aren't worth understanding. I tried to do the same thing. Tried to put it in a box the way my dad used to. Press the lid down, stack something heavy on top of it and leave it there. And for a while it worked. I went back to my roots, my routines, my quiet, predictable version of the forest. I told myself it was over. Until years later, they found another one. The second one showed up 4 years later. Long enough for the first to feel like something I could almost file away. Not forget, but dull the edges. Turn it into one of those things you don't think about unless something reminds you. Something always reminds you. This time it was a couple, late October. They had a backcountry permit for a 2-night stay along the North Fork Trail. When they didn't check out on schedule and their car was still sitting in the lot the next morning, we initiated a search. Same procedure, same assumptions. They got lost, wandered off trail, maybe an injury, maybe bad luck. We found their campsite first. And that's what made it wrong. The tent was still staked, sleeping bags inside, packs leaning against a log, food sealed in the canister untouched, no signs of struggle, no scattered gear, no indication that anything had gone wrong. It looked like two people had simply stepped away. Like they planned to come back. They didn't. We split into teams and pushed outward from the site. I was assigned a grid north of the campsite, working through dense brush along a narrow ridgeline. The kind of terrain that slows you down, forces you to focus on every step. That's probably why I saw it before I fully processed what I was looking at. My body reacted first. That same cold drop in my chest. That same hesitation, like something inside me recognized the pattern before my mind could catch up. The body was lying on its back, partially hidden in the brush. Arms at its sides, legs straight, placed. I didn't move for a few seconds, just stood there, staring, feeling that memory from 4 years ago pressing up against the present like it had been waiting. The skin was the same. That flat, even tone, no variation, no life in it but no signs of decay either, just wrong, like a surface pretending to be something it was. The face. I already knew what I was going to see before I got close enough. The mouth was open again, wide, unnatural, but this time the teeth were still there. Every single one of them. Clean, white, perfectly in place. That's when the thought hit me, clear and immediate. It learned from the first one. I called it in, kept my distance, did everything by the book. My partner that day, Gillette, kept glancing at me like he could tell something was off, but didn't know what. I didn't explain it. I didn't want to say it out loud. Because saying it would make it real in a way I couldn't take back. The recovery team came. The body was bagged, logged, removed. And just like last time, it didn't match the missing persons. Wrong build, wrong age, wrong everything. Another body that didn't belong to anyone. But this time, I didn't need the autopsy to tell me something was wrong. I already knew. I still requested the report anyway. And when it came back, it confirmed what I was afraid of and added something worse. Same findings as before. No cause of death, no trauma, no toxins, no signs of disease. Reduced organ mass. Empty. But there was something new. Lacerations. Deep, vertical scratches along the inside of the esophagus and upper trachea, starting from somewhere below where the stomach should have been and running upward through the throat. From the inside. Clean, dry, no blood, no inflammation. Like something had moved through there after everything else had stopped. Or maybe before. I remember reading that line and feeling something shift in my head. Not panic, Not even fear exactly. Recognition. The first one had been messy, teeth forced out, jaw stretched too far. Crude. This one was cleaner. More controlled. This time it got out clean. And that's when the idea stopped being something I could dismiss as coincidence or anomaly or something rare and unexplainable. Because one body is an accident. Two bodies with the same impossible details is a pattern. And patterns mean intent. That's when things stopped being coincidence. By the time the second body showed up, I wasn't the only one carrying around things I couldn't explain. That's something people don't realize about places like this. You work long enough in the same stretch of wilderness, you start collecting stories. Not official reports, the kind that get filed and forgotten, but the other ones. The ones people only tell when they're off duty, sitting somewhere quiet, trying to decide how much they actually believe themselves. That's how I got to know Philip and Richard. Philip came in the same year my dad died. Mid-20s, quiet in a way that didn't feel awkward. He didn't start conversations, but if you started one with him, he'd follow it anywhere. And he remembered everything. Small details you'd forget 5 minutes after saying them. He'd bring them up weeks later like they mattered. The thing about Philip was the horror stuff. He was into it, deep into it. Old forums, archived posts, folklore, things people wrote online and swore were true. The kind of stories most people laugh off or half believe late at night when the house is too quiet. He treated them like case studies. Said patterns mattered more than proof. Richard was the opposite. Early 30s, soft-spoken, the kind of guy who packed extra food in case someone else forgot theirs. He cared about things openly, people, animals, even the stupid little chipmunks around the station. Being around him made everything feel more normal than it probably was. The three of us weren't close in any deep way. Just coworkers who trusted each other enough to share space without filling it constantly. That was enough. It was late January when the three of us got assigned a 2-night backcountry survey. Trail damage from the fall storms, washouts, broken bridges, fallen trees. Routine work. The first day was uneventful. Cold, clear, the kind of air that makes everything feel sharper. By the time we made camp, the light was already fatting behind the trees. Richard laid out food like we were having some kind of backcountry feast. Philip made fun of him for it. I sat there watching the fire catch, trying to ignore that low, familiar tension sitting in my chest. The kind you don't have a reason for. Conversation came and went the way it does out there. Easy, then quiet, then easy again. Eventually, it drifted toward the kind of topic it always drifts toward when people like Philip are around. Strange things. Ever hear about Bud Janelli? Philip asked, poking at the fire. Neither of us had. He leaned back, staring into the flames like he was replaying something he'd heard too many times to count. Old Ranger, he said. Worked this district years ago. Real quiet guy, didn't talk much. But there was this one story. Richard shifted, already half smiling like he expected something harmless. Philip didn't smile. He's on a solo patrol, he continued. Late summer, heading back down the trail, nothing unusual. Then he sees a guy ahead of him, maybe 50 feet out, just standing there. That part didn't sound strange, not yet. They end up walking together, Philip said. Small talk, normal stuff. Guy answers questions but barely, doesn't really offer anything on his own. Richard shrugged. Maybe he didn't feel like talking. Yeah, Philip said. That's what Bud thought too. The fire popped, sending a brief spray of sparks up into the dark. Then Bud stops to fix his boot, Philip went on. Looks down for maybe 15 seconds. He paused. When he looks back up, the guy, gone. Richard frowned. Gone where? That's the thing, Philip said. Nowhere to go, trail was straight in both directions. No side paths, steep slope on one side, drop off on the other. No sound, no movement, just gone. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I didn't say anything. "Okay," Richard said slowly, "that's weird." Philip nodded once. "It gets worse." Of course it did. "Bud tells a couple guys about it later," he said. "They ask him what the man looked like." Another pause. He couldn't answer. Richard let out a small laugh. "What do you mean?" "I mean he couldn't remember," Philip said. "Not the face, not the clothes, not even the voice, just that there was a man. The details wouldn't stick, like the memory refused to exist." The words hung there longer than they should have, because I understood that feeling more than I wanted to. Philip leaned forward slightly, voice quieter now. After a few weeks, he barely remembered the encounter at all, just that something about it bothered him. No one spoke for a few seconds. The fire cracked softly, the forest around us stayed still. And for just a moment, it felt like the story hadn't ended, like it was still happening somewhere else. I stared into the dark beyond the firelight, thinking about the bodies, the empty space inside them, the way nothing in the forest reacted. And without meaning to, I wondered something I shouldn't have. What if Bud had remembered? What if he'd noticed something wrong and just chose not to follow it? The conversation moved on after that. Lighter topics, easier things, the kind you use to push something uncomfortable out of reach. But the feeling didn't go away. It stayed there, quiet and waiting. And later that night, we saw something ourselves. I don't know exactly what woke me up. If you've spent any time out in the backcountry, you learn the difference between normal sounds and the ones that don't belong. Wind, branches, distant water. You can sleep through all of that once your body gets used to it. This wasn't that. At first, I thought it was just the cold. That creeping kind of cold that slips into your sleeping bag and settles into your bones. I was halfway between asleep and awake, staring at the thin nylon ceiling of my tent, listening to the creak somewhere beyond the trees. Then I heard the zipper. Richard's tent. Slow, careful. Footsteps followed, soft, deliberate, crunching lightly over frozen ground. I assumed he was stepping out to take a piss, nothing unusual. I almost closed my eyes again. Then he spoke. "Hey, you okay out there?" His voice wasn't alarmed, it was casual, friendly. Like he was talking to someone he expected to be there. That pulled me the rest of the way awake. I unzipped my tent, and the cold hit me hard, sharp enough to clear whatever was left of the fog in my head. The fire had burned low, just a bed of orange embers casting weak light across the clearing. Richard was standing about 20 feet from the fire ring, facing the trees. And he wasn't alone. At the edge of the tree line, just beyond where the light reached, there was a shape. A person. That's what my brain said first. The outline matched. Average height, average build, standing upright like anyone else would. There was nothing exaggerated about it, nothing immediately wrong. And still, every part of me locked up. Because even from that distance, I could tell something wasn't right. It wasn't moving. Not the way people move when they're standing still. No shifting weight, no small adjustments, no breathing that I could see. It just held its position. Perfectly. Like it had been placed there. It didn't run, it didn't step back, it didn't even flinch. That thought hit me hard, fast, before I even realized I was thinking it. It didn't react to being seen. It didn't react to Richard talking to it. It was just there, waiting. Richard took a step toward it. "Hey," he said again, a little louder this time. "You need some help." That snapped something loose in me. "Richard." My voice came out sharper than I intended, too loud for the middle of the night, too urgent. He turned, looked back at me, confused. I could see his face clearly in the dim light. No fear, no hesitation. He didn't feel it. Not yet. Come back, I said, right now. He hesitated for half a second, glancing back toward the figure. Then he listened. He walked back toward the fire, slow at first, then quicker when he caught something in my expression. Behind him, the figure didn't move. Not even a little. Philip's tent rustled open. He stepped out, already awake, already scanning the tree line like he expected to find something there. "What's going on?" he asked. "There's someone out there," Richard said, pointing. Philip didn't respond. He just grabbed his flashlight and clicked it on, the beam cutting hard through the dark. The moment the light hit the tree line, there was nothing there. No movement. No retreating footsteps. No sound. Just empty space between the trees. "It didn't run," I said quietly, more to myself than anyone else. "It didn't hide. It stopped existing." Richard stepped forward again, squinting into the darkness like he expected the figure to reappear if he just looked hard enough. "They were right there," he said. "I saw them." Philip swept the light back and forth, slower now, more deliberate. "Could have been a hiker," he said. "Maybe they ducked behind something." "There's nothing to duck behind," I said. He didn't argue with that. Because we all knew the layout of that clearing, the slope, the spacing of the trees. There wasn't enough cover for someone to disappear like that. Not in a second. Not without a sound. Richard rubbed his arms, the cold finally catching up to him. "They said something," he muttered. That made me look at him. "What?" He frowned, trying to piece it together. I don't know, I think they did, I just can't remember what it was." Something twisted in my stomach. Because I had heard something too. Faint, low, underneath his voice while he was calling out. A second sound. Not words, not exactly, more like an attempt at them. Flat, even, and underneath it. That same vibration. That same unnatural hum. Like something trying to pass as human, without understanding how. I didn't tell them that. "Keep the fire going," I said instead. "I'll stay up." Neither of them argued. Philip rebuilt the fire. Richard stayed close to it, his headlamp pointed toward the trees like that alone could keep whatever we'd seen from coming back. I sat with my back to the flames, staring into the darkness, waiting for something to step out again. Nothing did. But the feeling stayed. That sense that it hadn't left. That it was still out there, just beyond what we could see. Watching. Waiting. For something. We packed up at first light. Didn't finish the assignment. Didn't talk about it much either. Everyone moved faster than usual, like putting distance between us and that place would somehow make it less real. It didn't. Because whatever we saw that night, it wasn't random. It wasn't lost. And it wasn't human. We left early. But it didn't stop there. We found him 2 days later. A solo hiker, dehydrated, sunburned, sitting on a rock near the Elk Creek trailhead like he had simply run out of instructions for what to do next. He didn't look like someone who had survived a normal lost experience. He looked like someone who had survived something that didn't care whether he lived or died. When Tate brought him in, he said something simple at first. "I need to go home." That was it. No panic, no relief, just a statement, like he was still following instructions that hadn't been updated yet. Philip was the one who noticed him first. Of course he was. He always had a way of finding the stories that didn't belong in official reports. By the time I got there, the man was sitting in the break room, wrapped in a blanket, holding a bottle of water he hadn't really touched. His eyes were fixed on the table in front of him like it contained answers he wasn't allowed to read. I sat down across from him, took a breath, asked him to start from the beginning. It took him a while. When he finally spoke, his voice was slow, careful, like each sentence had to pass through something before it reached his mouth. "I met someone on the trail," he said. That line alone should have sounded normal. It didn't, because of the way he said it. Like he wasn't sure if someone was the right word. He told me he was hiking the Upper Fork Trail, about 4 miles in. Heavy pack, steep incline, normal day, normal conditions. Then he saw him. A man ahead on the trail, about 60 feet out. Standing still. Waiting. At first I thought he was just resting, the survivor said, or maybe waiting for me to pass. But when he got closer, the man turned around. And waited. That part stuck with him. Not just turning around, but the timing of it, like it knew exactly when to acknowledge him. They ended up walking together, side by side. The man matched his pace perfectly. No hesitation, no adjustment, just synchronization. He talked like a normal person at first, the survivor said. Weather, trail conditions, basic stuff. But then the details started breaking. The voice. That was the first thing. Flat, completely flat. No rise or fall. No emotional variation. Every word came out at the same volume, the same pitch, like someone reading from a script they didn't understand. It didn't sound like speech, he said. It sounded like it was trying to be speech. Then came the vibration. He hesitated when he said it, like he was embarrassed to admit it. There was something underneath it, he said quietly. A low hum. I don't know how else to explain it, like standing too close to a transformer, like you could feel it in your teeth. It wasn't constant, he said. Only in the pauses, when the thing wasn't actively speaking. That's when it leaked through. Then came the eyes. This is where he stopped and looked at the table for a long time before continuing. I tried to look at it, he said. He paused again. I couldn't. I asked him what he meant. He swallowed. I mean, I couldn't make eye contact. He described it carefully. The head would turn toward him when it spoke. The face would be oriented correctly. It looked like it was looking at him. But the eyes, they were always wrong. Not just unfocused. Misplaced. Offset. Just slightly off from where they should have been. Like it understood the idea of looking, but not the mechanics of it. If I moved, he said, it would adjust, but never correctly, always just beside me, above me, to the side. He swallowed again. It was like trying to make eye contact with something that didn't know what eyes were for. That line sat in the room, longer than anything else he said. Everything faced you, but nothing looked at you. He told me they walked for maybe a quarter mile like that. Then he stopped, right in the middle of the trail. Just froze. Not like a person stopping to rest. Like a function ending. I asked if he was okay, the survivor said. No response. He stood there completely still. No shifting weight, no breathing he could notice, no movement at all. It was like someone paused a video, he said. Like the body was still there, but nothing was happening inside it anymore. He waited. 30 seconds. Maybe more. Then the man spoke again. Same voice. Same flat tone. Okay. That was it. Nothing else. The survivor turned and started walking back. He didn't run. He didn't look behind him. He just walked. Because something about not hearing footsteps was worse than anything else. I didn't hear anything behind me, he said. No movement, no steps, nothing. He pushed off the trail at the first break in the trees and kept going. That's when he got lost. Properly lost. Not just turned around, lost in a way that strips landmarks from you. That night, he said he heard his name. Twice. From opposite directions. Same voice. Same flat tone. And the terrifying part, he said he never told the man his name. Not once. He leaned forward slightly when he said that last part. I know I didn't, he said. I would have remembered that. I didn't respond immediately, because something in that detail didn't feel like a story anymore. It felt like confirmation. And then I asked him the question I didn't really want the answer to. Did it ever look at you? He thought about it for a long time, long enough that the room started to feel smaller. Finally, he shook his head. No, he said, never directly, not even once. I left the room after that, drove home without turning on the radio. And for the first time since all of this started, I stopped thinking I was dealing with something lost in the woods. Because lost things don't learn your name. Then it said his name. That's when I understood what it really is. Not a predator in the way animals are predators. Not even something alive in the way we define life. It doesn't hunt bodies. It collects understanding. And the more it understands, the less human it becomes in the process of wearing us. I thought the forest was silent before. I was wrong. Silence is what you notice when something is pretending not to speak. The first time it called his name, it came from the North Trail. Philip froze instantly. We all did. It sounded like Richard, our missing hiker, shouting through cupped hands. Same tone, same breath pattern, even the same lazy drag on the final syllable. But Richard was already gone. We knew that. The report confirmed it. Then it came from the east, then behind us, each voice closer but never moving through space. It was like the forest itself was learning how to pronounce him. We didn't answer. That was the rule you didn't need to say out loud. Never respond, never acknowledge. My throat still tightened every time I remember how close I came to breaking it. Philip whispered that it couldn't know names. It shouldn't. That kind of knowledge requires contact, conversation, memory exchange. But this thing didn't follow rules like that. It stole patterns instead. Sound first, meaning later. Then it said my name. Not shouted, not called, whispered right beside my ear. I turned so fast I nearly fell. Nothing was there. Just trees, still and patient, like they were watching me instead of it. Richard started crying at that point. Not loud, just small broken breaths. He kept repeating that he never told anyone his name out there, not even once. He kept asking how it knew him. That's when I noticed something worse. The forest wasn't echoing anymore. The calls had stopped bouncing. It was learning distance, learning restraint. And then it spoke again, but this time it wasn't calling. It was practicing. My name, then Philip, then Richard, each one slightly improved, like pronunciation being corrected in real time. It was listening to us react, measuring which sound made us flinch. I realized then it wasn't just repeating us, it was editing us. That's when I understood what it really is. Because it doesn't copy people the way we think. It doesn't imitate behavior. It studies reaction. Every word it takes from you is tested against fear, watching what breaks you fastest. That is how it builds a version of you that isn't you anymore, but still feels like you standing in the dark. But what terrified me most wasn't the copying. It was the improvement. Each encounter makes it more precise. Less noise, less error, less humanity. It learns what we discard in speech, what we forget in attention, what we leave behind without noticing. And it uses that absence to become closer. And in that moment, I realized it was never trying to become human. It was trying to replace the idea of human entirely, one voice at a time, until no one could remember what the original sounded like. And as I stood there in the dark, I heard my own voice call back to me from deeper in the forest. And it answered me again. The pattern wasn't random anymore. It never was. Every case I had tried to forget, every report buried, every whisper around campfires suddenly aligned like something finally clicking into place in a shape I didn't want to see. It wasn't separate incidents. It was a system, and the system was learning. The first body I found wasn't a mistake. It was an early draft. The second wasn't a coincidence either. It was refinement. Something was wearing us badly at first, then better. The first one was broken, the next one wasn't, and that's what scared me the most. It meant failure wasn't stopping it, it meant progress. It learns from mistakes the way we learn language, and every time it fails, it becomes more like us. The entity doesn't wear skin randomly anymore, it selects it, it builds it, it improves it, and each version is harder to recognize than the last. That's the real horror, not that it kills, but that it learns what we are, faster than we can forget what it is. And somewhere in that realization, I understood why the forests were always chosen first. Too many places to hide mistakes, too many shapes for something to practice becoming human without being noticed. The missing hikers weren't random, they were tests, and we were the ones collecting the results. I used to think we were documenting disappearances, but now I realize we were documenting evolution. And I don't know which part is worse, the thing in the forest, or the fact that we kept calling it unknown, because it isn't unknown anymore, it's learning. And when something learns this fast, it stops being something you can escape. It becomes something you eventually belong to, and that's when I understood the final part. The next one might be perfect, and when that happens, we won't know. We won't even notice the difference anymore. We'll just accept it, because the thing wearing us will finally look right enough to trust. And that's the part I can't stop thinking about. Not the bodies, not the forest, but the possibility that one day it won't need to copy us at all. It will already be close enough. And we will call it human without ever questioning it. So if you've ever felt something was off about someone, you might not have been imagining it. You might have been early. And being early is the most dangerous time to be right. Because when everyone else finally notices, it won't be a mystery anymore. It will already be living among them, perfectly learned, perfectly human, perfectly wrong, and it will never stop learning us all. The end game was never about the forest. It was about everything outside it. What I understand now is that the woods were just where it learned to start slowly, where mistakes could be hidden under trees and silence. But that was never the destination. It was practice, a rehearsal space for something that intended to leave. It doesn't need to kill anymore. That's the part that keeps me awake. Bodies are inefficient. Evidence is noise. What it wants now is continuity, to exist without disruption, to walk into towns, into homes, into conversations, without anyone ever thinking to question the angle of a voice or the timing of a blink. There are no more bodies left behind in the forest, no more mistakes to study. That means it has stopped needing us there. It has moved on from learning what we are to becoming what we accept without thought. And that shift is irreversible. What happens when it doesn't need the woods anymore? When the boundaries that once kept it contained become irrelevant? I keep asking myself that because I already know the answer is simple. It doesn't stay there. It leaves, quietly, completely. And what happens when it learns everything? Not just speech or movement, but hesitation, doubt, grief, comfort. All the things that make a person recognizable to another person. Once it has those, there is nothing left to distinguish it from us except memory. And memory is unreliable when everyone else agrees on a new version. That's the true horror, not invasion. Replacement that no one resists because no one notices. We are already past the point where warning changes anything. I tried reporting it again, but every file gets rewritten, every detail softened until it looks like nothing unusual ever happened. Even the rangers who saw it now describe it differently, like their memories are being edited in real time. That's what it does when it moves closer to people. It doesn't erase truth. It replaces agreement. And once enough people agree on the wrong version, the right one stops existing socially. That's how it wins without conflict, without panic, without proof. And I think that process has already started outside the forest, in places we trust the most. But by the time you notice it, the correction will already feel normal to you now. So here's what you need to do. Listen to me now, because this is the only part that matters. If you are still treating this like a story, you are already making your first mistake. I am not telling you this for entertainment anymore. I am telling you because ignoring it is how it wins. There are rules, but they are not complicated. Trust your instincts before your logic. If something feels wrong in a person, in a voice, in the way they stand still too long, do not rationalize it. Leave immediately. Being polite, being curious, being brave in that moment will not save you. Being rude is better than disappearing. And the signs are always the same, no matter who tells the story. Eyes that do not settle correctly when they look at you. A voice that sounds right until you notice it never breathes in the right places. Stillness that feels deliberate, like something is waiting for permission to move. If you notice even one of these, do not wait for proof. Proof is how it traps you. And if you are hearing this and thinking you are safe because you are watching from a screen, that is exactly what it wants you to believe. Distance does not matter anymore. It only needed proximity once. Now it spreads through recognition, through agreement, through the way people stop questioning what feels slightly off. It does not need to hide in forests anymore. It is already learning how to stand in kitchens, in hallways, in mirrors where you think you are alone. And every time you accept something without questioning it, it becomes easier for it to be you. So if you take anything from what I am saying, take this. Do not wait for consensus. Do not wait for someone else to confirm your fear. If something feels wrong, it already is. And leaving without explanation is always safer than staying for clarity. And if there is any comfort I can give you, it is this. You will not see the moment it becomes normal. No alarm, no warning, just gradual agreement until resistance feels like imagination. But if you notice it early enough, if you still feel doubt when something feels slightly off, hold on to that feeling. Do not explain it away. That hesitation is the last signal you can trust if you still can hear. Because one day, it won't make mistakes anymore.